Hello everyone, my name is Guillemette Caupin, and first I wanted to thank the committee of the 17th International Conference of Conservation Restoration Studies for the opportunity to present my research. I am currently a PhD student in art history at Panthéon-La Sorbonne University in Paris, and therefore I am here today to present my ongoing research directed by Noémie Etienne and Thierry Lalo, both who I also wanted to thank for their support and their trust throughout this experience. Aside from this PhD, I am working as a painting conservator in New York, specializing on contemporary art. And today I am going to present the following subject: active conservation, the painting conservator, a participant in the making of paintings in France, 1848-1960. The purpose of this topic is to bridge art history with the history of painting conservation and its technique, and to encourage a multidisciplinary speech and understand better the materiality of paintings. First of all, let me present you a well-known example of collaboration between an artist with a restorer that illustrates a typical active conservation situation. It is the relationship between the Arrault family, a French family of art dealers, artist suppliers, restorers, and painters, with the artists of the time and with Eugène Delacroix in particular during the 19th century. This case study had been studied multiple times by the research community, but was not defined within the conservation and restoration practice. Indeed, Delacroix collaborated with the father Henri Arrault and then the son Étienne François Arrault, you can see here on this painting by Carolus Durand, since the 1840s by providing the artist with frames, canvases, color bladers, and assisting him in all the temporalities of his creation. For example, in 1852, while Delacroix was creating the decor of the Salon de la Paix at the Paris Hôtel de Ville, he asked Étienne François Arrault to restretch the canvases during the execution of the painting as necessary if they relax. The Arrault family acts as assistants and helpers within the creation by performing many practical tasks on ongoing artworks not only for Delacroix, but for other contemporaneous artists. In this way, active conservation partnerships are already in place in the half of the 19th century. The question is, are there many other examples like this? Actually, yes, and this is the topic of my research from the past 3 years. Collaboration of intermediaries within the creation were already mentioned in the literature by André Chastel and Christophe Paumian in the late 1980s, as all individuals who assume responsibilities between present or past artists and the public. Authors mentioned art dealers, private collectors, and so on, but restorers were not part of the list. The implication of the restorer as an intermediary and a participant in the artistic process is precisely what I called active conservation, described as all the measures and actions aimed to elaborate and operate an artwork. They are carried out during the process of creating the work or within a few years after its completion. These measures are direct or indirect and can interfere with the materials and structures of the item. Active conservation appears to be one of the restore activities practiced at least from the second half of the 19th century, and we can try to contextualize it among the heritage conservation field. In 2008, the International Council of Museums defined the following 3 action levels, which together constitute the conservation of cultural heritage. The first one here is the preventive conservation, which defines all actions meant to avoid and minimize future deteriorations and carried out within the context or on the surroundings of an item, whatever its age and condition. These indirect actions do not interfere or modify the appearance of the object. The second level of action here is the remedial conservation, defined by all actions directly applied to an item to stop current alteration processes or reinforce its structure. These actions are only carried out when the item needs it and sometimes modify the appearance of the object. Finally, the third level is the restoration action, directly applied to a stable item and carried out to facilitate its aesthetic appreciation and understanding when the item has lost part of its significance through past deteriorations. Those actions, like retouching paint losses, obviously modify the appearance of the object. So, active conservation could be considered as a fourth level of actions referring to treatments performed directly on recent items and aimed to avoid and limit its degradation in the future. These measures also influence the appearance of the object. A typical pattern of active conservation scenario put together the following 5 parameters to be valid. First, an artwork on paper, canvas, wooden panel, or other substrates, and painted with various drawing and painting techniques. Active conservation is then commissioned by a private clientele who is most of the time the artist itself. Active conservation scenario is also defined by its technician, usually the restorer specialized in painting conservation. Research had shown that figures like paper makers, framers, or artist suppliers also offer active conservation services. In any case, the technician practices direct or indirect actions during the creation. The last parameter is the involvement of another intermediary from the art world, like art dealers, that encourage and facilitate such collaboration. Active conservation treatments take place at the beginning of the material life of a work through 3 different temporalities of the production. The first one is related to the time before the production of the painting, while the artist's idea is still in design and has no physical form yet. The second temporality is associated to the execution of the artwork. In this situation, the restorer is a significant contributor and active participant to the artistic process, helping the artist to create a physical form to his work. Finally, the last temporality appears subsequently to the execution within a few years after the completion of the work, when the artist achieved the physical form of his painting. In any case, the technician's gesture is added to the one of the artist from the conception to the distribution of his work to the public. He is dedicated to the recent productions and he is a chosen intermediary to the artist of his time. To be more specific, let's look more closely to those 3 time-related parameters through a couple examples. Before the creations, the technician can act as a consultant or an advisor without doing any actions. By sharing his expertise and technical knowledge, he has a crucial impact on the conception and the idea of the work. The technician can also carry out direct actions by preparing and providing raw materials and material resources to the artist, such as varnishes and primed canvases. As an example, we can mention the cooperation between the Parisian restoration studio mise-en-oeuvre and the French decorative painter Emmanuel Cavaillé-Coll, revealed by the Émile Rostand archives from the Getty Research Institute collections. The studio prepared and supplied large numbers of blank or primed canvases and stretchers for the artist's projects. Among these, the studio contributed to the canvas preparation the marouflage of decorative schemes in some 20 sleeping and restaurant cars you can see on this picture here for the Compagnie Internationale des Wagons-Lits from 1903 to 1910, which represents more than 3,000 square feet of linen fabric. In this situation, the restorer collaborated with the artist on the early stages of his work, acting as a qualified technical assistant who supplies, prepares, and assembles the raw materials even before the artist executes his painting. Collaboration during the creative process is surely the most common situation of active conservation. The restorer intervenes while the first brushstrokes have already been applied to the substrates, and he works on fresh materials which are by nature sensitive and unstable. The restorer acts as an aid to the creation during the production process by operating direct actions such as structural interventions and treatment to the paint layer. The range of interventions is quite large and uses approximately the same techniques as remedial conservation and restoration. The restorer can proceed with format changes, linings, paint consolidations, and installations. Intervention to the paint layer mostly implies varnishing and retouching. One of the best examples to share here is the technique of the French artist Georges Rouault by showing this archival document here, which is an invoice from the Parisian restoration studio directed by Charles Chapuis and Marcel Coins in February 1935. In this record, the French artist Georges Rouault, also active in the first half of the 20th century in Paris, is asking conservation treatments on 4 of his ongoing paintings on paper. Hécatombe guerrière, Tête de femme, Trio de parade, and Portrait de Madame Rouault are all being lined onto canvas. The case study of Georges Rouault is kind of unique in this research because the artist collaborated with multiple Parisian restoration studios during his lifetime, and you can see here their invoices letterhead. Known to start his sketches on paper with drawing techniques, Rouault then kept working on his drawing with thicker mediums like gouache and oil paintings. And to add this thickness to his papers, Rouault frequently commissioned active conservation treatment, asking restorers to mount the paper onto canvas or wooden panels by doing marouflage. Indeed, oil on paper laid down onto cardboard, wooden panels, or canvas are very common and not anecdotal in Georges Rouault's manner. The restorer action is then essential in the making of the artist's artworks. Let's look at Le Conférencier, one of his unachieved paintings from the Centre Georges Pompidou collection in Paris, which shows a sign of active conservation treatment. As an example of around 1,000 artworks by Rouault in the museum collection, more than 700 illustrate this kind of stratigraphy. The Conférencier is painted onto multiple pieces of paper, then laid down onto canvas with an intermediary layer of cotton gauze you can see on this picture. The lining was probably performed by Chapuis and Coins studio, known for practicing this lining technique called Italian lining method. Finally, the third temporality in which the restorer intervenes is after the achievement of an artwork, within a few years and not exceeded 10 years after the completion of the painting. Because beyond that, it is considered that the work may present alterations due to, among other factors, the natural aging of the materials of a painting. A large range of direct actions can be performed by the technician to support the distribution of the work. The most impressive and technically spectacular is the in situ installation of paintings. Let's present the example of the decoration project of the Opéra Garnier sailing in Paris by the Russian-born artist Marc Chagall in 1964. Since the opening of the opera in 1875, a more classic work by Jules Eugène Leneveu, you can see here on the right, was sitting at the sailing directly painted on a copper substrate. In the early 1960s, Marc Chagall was asked to create a new sailing composition aimed to be installed on top of the original painted panels by Leneveu. And more than 2,000 square foot canvas were painted by the artist, you can see here on the left, with the help of 3 assistant painters. Each panel was then mounted on 24 removable polyester resin substrates to be placed at 10 cm from the original surface and preserve the Leneveu composition. And here you can see an archival photograph that illustrates their installation by qualified technicians. The consolidation operations of the linen fabric, as well as the in situ installation of each panel, were supervised by the restorer Émile Rostin. Through those examples presented today, we clearly understand that the restorer, who traditionally intervenes alongside ancient and damaged cultural objects, also collaborates on recent and ongoing productions to make them visible and accessible to the public. Overall, the implication of the restorer and other skilled technicians on contemporaneous artworks offer a better understanding of the complexity of the cooperative networks around the making of paintings. And this concludes my presentation. Many thanks for being here today and for your attention.